Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Travauto. Today I wanted to talk about should you buy or should you rent an RV? 2020 was a pretty crazy time, and it seems like it's still a little bit crazy right now. Uh, Last year the RV industry experienced a huge influx of new customers, and that ended up for the RV industry last year in 2020. They sold about 430,000 units. That's kind of crazy, and it's about a 4.3% increase over 2019. Seems like everybody still wants an RV. Now, I don't think this trend's going to continue into 2021, but we live in crazy times, so who knows? Uh, Pay attention to a lot of industry websites to see where the industry is going, where my rental business is going, and what the potential for the year might be. And it looks like, according to the Wandering RV, that now there's 9 million households that own an RV, and that's a crazy amount of RVs in the country. Uh, and I've owned a few of these rolling homes over the years, and I've been renting mine out on various platforms for for about the last 6 years. I've had some good sides and some bad sides. Good customers, bad customers, and some of the good customers make it worthwhile to do the business, and some of the bad customers make you never want to do it again. Uh, some of the good customers, just as an example, we would have. I would put together a PDF of how everything in the RV works and send it out to customers before they would pick up the RV. And one of the times the customer actually took my PDF, decided they wanted a print copy of it, went to Office Max or somewhere to Kinko's, and ended up making a bound and laminated version of it. And then they just gave it to me at the end. So I still keep it in there to this day. Some of the bad customers hide stuff, they lie about stuff, and I find out about damages later on, well past the point where I could actually charge anyone for it. The joys of RVing. So before I did all this renting of the RVs, we either just own one outright or we rented. And when we rented directly from RV dealerships, and it was pricey, but there was a peace of mind of being able to rent the RV for a week or for a weekend, and then drop the thing back off and walk away and never have to see it again. And when you have three small kids, driving in an RV somewhere is a significantly more relaxing experience than driving in a minivan, especially when kids start screaming, when they get crabby. Lots of other different situations why driving in the RV is much more relaxing. Another good reason for renting the RV is your trip experience. And what I mean by that is, if something goes wrong with the RV while you're using it, if you're renting it, chances are when you come back, if something went wrong, you're probably going to get some sort of refund or discount or something like that, because something went wrong on your trip. If you own it, you're going to just end up spending money to fix the problem. If you're renting, you don't have to worry about it again, even though it might have sometimes ruined your vacation because something went wrong. But as I know, as an RV owner, even if I can do all the maintenance in the world and keep it up and running, tip-top shape, stuff will just go wrong with an RV, and there's no preventing it. And if I wanted to always prevent it, that's an impossibility, and I'd be spending so much money on maintenance that nobody would ever rent their RV. The same thing with tires. Before the RV goes out, tires are checked. When it comes back, the tires are checked. I check tread depth, check for the bubbles in the tires, check every single tire, and there's 6 tires on it. So when it leaves, I know the tires are good. And if you run over something on the road when you're renting, the customer has to pay for that. Like, I don't pay for that because you're driving it, not me. And when you have to replace that tire, it can be typically between $450 and $550 on the side of the road, which is expensive, but that's maybe one of the downsides to renting an RV instead of owning one. So should you buy one instead? And this is really the list of 4 things that I've found over the years that tell me whether or not you'd really want to own one. And it's just my experience in it. It doesn't mean you can't, of course, do whatever you want. But number one in my book has always been we couldn't pay cash for any of these things when we bought one, and I feel like that was a mistake, or maybe just getting a business loan for it. But since we planned to rent out the second one, that was the only reason we bought a second one, was because we were going to rent it out. And when you look at the loans on RVs, they range anywhere from 10 to 20 years. Now, some of the lower priced RVs in the travel trailers, they can be 15 to 20,000, and you can get a 5-year loan on it. But the way that they're sold to you at the dealership, typically they want to get you into a 10-year loan because the payment is so low on a $20,000 RV. A 10-year payment is $100 and some a month, and it's cheap, but you're paying so much interest on it that even the travel trailers drop enough in value. That's not necessarily true right now because of the crazy amount of demand for RVs right now. But in a couple of years, I expect that to flip back around, and then a lot of people that got 10-year loans on their travel trailers or their RVs are gonna be in trouble. So, I looked up a study a little while ago from the University of Michigan that all RV owners, half of all of the RV owners have owned their RV for less than 5 years. And if you look at the amortization schedule on an RV, the first 5 years is mostly paying interest. And so basically what the study is telling me is that the vast majority of people that buy these RVs aren't even really getting into the principal that much. So they're going to be upside down on the loan unless you have a huge down payment. And even if you did, you're losing a lot of your down payment because of a really long-term loan. So, if you're going to run it as a business like I did, the payback period was really fast if you're renting it out as full-time as you can. It puts wear and tear on it. So it's not as nice of an RV for you to hop back in, and there's caveats and downsides to renting it out. But really, the loan side of it, unless you're going to rent it out, getting a full loan on it is not the best idea financially. So the second point really is having a garage to put it in. I think that this is one of the most overlooked parts of RV ownership. And if you don't have a garage to put it in, it's not the end of the world. But I did store one of them outside, and it created so many more issues with maintenance, with things falling apart, with water intrusion, that when it sits outside, it gets hit with all the weather and all the sun and the sleet and the hail and the snow and the rain. And that just wreaks havoc on the exterior of an RV. So when you keep it inside, you don't have to worry about any of that. But one of the biggest problems that RV owners run into that I've seen over the years is the tiniest crack in the caulking around an RV can let water in. And we don't necessarily think about that with cars very often, but with RVs, because a lot of them are still made with wood. I mean, this is wood, glue, and screws and caulking. It's like your house, but it rolls down the road and it vibrates and things crack and let loose. So if this sits outside, you're just letting the UV rays degrade the caulking, which needs to be done every couple of years anyway. And then if it rains at all and you get any cracking in this, what they call it Dicor, typically on the roof, it's a self-leveling sealant. But when that stuff cracks and then you get water in there, that creates so much havoc that many times it'll create tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage for someone to come in and fix it. I've seen new RVs with water intrusion. And actually a friend of ours had purchased a new travel trailer, and I can't remember what it was. I think it was an R-Pod. And brand new from the factory, had water intrusion issues. So when stuff like that happens, it's such a pain. And when you store it outside, it makes things a lot worse. So, not everyone has the opportunity to have it stored inside, and storing it inside from someone else, if you find a place to store it, is expensive. But, to keep your massive investment, which, in our case, I think the RV, when we originally bought it, was about $77,000 with taxes. And, now it's paid off, but the idea of having something that costs that much money sitting outside and just constantly depreciating and creating more maintenance just doesn't sound like a good idea. So that was just one of the other things that I've found over the years, that it is, if you have a place to store it, great. That's the best thing that you can have. So the next point is living close to a dealership. Now, this doesn't sound like maybe that big of a deal up front, but if you're not within 10 miles of your selling dealership or a servicing dealership, and that's another thing that we can get into about the selling versus servicing dealer. Some dealerships don't like to service your vehicle and will put you at the bottom of a list if you didn't buy it there. And I've had that happen to me personally. And the first question they'll ask you when you bring it in for service is, did you buy it here? So that's interesting. But if you don't live close to a dealership, like I live about 45 minutes away from the closest Jayco service center. And not only are they backed up all the time where you have to leave your RV there, even for some simple stuff, you have to leave it there for weeks. Now, if you buy a brand new motorhome, you can quickly find out that the first year of ownership can be, it's not all the time, but it can be an absolute nightmare with warranty issues, things not working correctly, not put together the right way, water leaks, things like that. And I've had my RV at the very beginning of ownership. I had it in there for almost 2 months, 2 full months in the dealership getting certain things fixed. And at one point I had to take my Jayco back to Jayco in Indiana, where I had to leave it. Now, thankfully that was over the winter time, and they ended up fixing a laundry list of issues that I had. But that's one of those things where I'm making payments on something that I can't use. And in my case, going to Indiana, I live in Michigan, so it was a 4-hour one-way trip. So, I mean, it's a full day of driving back and forth, and then you have to leave it there. So, also, when I drove it to Jayco, I had to have my wife follow me, and so we had to take the kids and drive all the way down to Indiana, and it was really crappy weather. It was a horrible experience, not necessarily with Jayco, because they did fix the stuff, but the idea that we had to take it there in the first place just to get things fixed on a brand new motorhome was just a pain in the rear. So if you don't live close to a dealership, it can be a really huge pain, and especially if they didn't do something right, or they didn't fix it for whatever reason, they overlooked it, or they didn't put the right part in, or the new part's defective. If you live in some places, I know, like you go out west and some of these dealerships in Montana or Colorado or Nebraska, they can be 3 hours away from you, and if they didn't fix something right the first time, the idea of driving back and forth seems like a lot of nonsense. So living close by to one can save you a significant amount of time and money. So also as an example, we have a dealership in town where I live, and the only problem is they don't sell Jaycos, and they won't service Jaycos. So I can't even get anything done in my local town unless I go to the original servicing dealer specific to Jayco motorhomes, which leads into the last point. And when you run out of warranty, RVs only come with a 1-year warranty. When you run out, if you don't live close to the dealership, you have to make a serious choice, especially if you're going to be renting out your motorhome. If you decide that's what you want to do, is you're going to have someone come back on a Saturday and it goes back out on Sunday or Monday, or a couple of days away. And when your renter brought it back, there's some broken stuff that you have to fix, and you have to get it fixed in the next day or two. So the vast majority of our RV dealerships that I have been to over the past 15 years, you cannot bring your vehicle in like a regular car dealership and say, hey, I really need this fixed. I've got to go on a trip or whatever, and I need it fixed in the next day or two. Like, that doesn't happen at RV dealerships. It is weeks, if not months. And especially now that the RV industry has literally exploded, if I were to call my servicing dealership right now, I would probably have to book an appointment 3 to 4 months out. So really where this next point comes in is you need to have decent mechanical abilities, and you got to be pretty good with wood and trim work, because there's just going to be lots of little stuff. You're going to need to pull the wood out. You're going to need to put new new coverings on the pieces of furniture. You're going to need to be able to recover stuff. You're going to need to be able to re-glue and screw all the wood. I mean, there's so many pieces of trim that have fallen off or broken off or whatnot on my RV, and it's not unique to my RV. And I think my RV's actually been relatively, given how many years I've been renting mine out, I think it's been relatively robust. But you need to be able to fix this stuff on your own. If you don't know how to rewire an electrical outlet, if you don't know how to you might even have to figure out how to take the furnace out and understand how it works. And there's not a lot of help out there about how a lot of these parts work. And I'm actually hoping on this channel that we can address a lot of that. So as long as you're good with working on this stuff and you don't have to take it to the dealership, that could be a bonus if you know how to do that. So maybe then in that case it would be worth it. My RV sits in my garage. I have a lot of tools from when I was a mechanic to be able to work on these things. I don't have everything, and there's some stuff that I can't do, but even if I have to weld something or take something large out or even work on any of the mechanical pieces of the chassis that's clearly out of warranty now, I can do most of that in the garage. So if you can get this stuff done, then maybe it makes a whole lot of sense to buy one rather than rent one. But from what I've seen and the people that have rented from me, the vast majority of people that have rented from me have no space to put an RV. And they would have to pay someone a storage fee every month. And storing an RV costs anywhere from $50 to $200 a month on top of your RV payment. And then again, it's just sitting outside and rotting in the sun. And they just don't do well sitting out there. As much as you'd think a recreational vehicle like this would be cool with just sitting outside in the sun because that's what they're meant to do, is be rolling homes on wheels, they don't do well. The caulking starts to crack, the gel coat oxidizes, you've got the sun beating on the tires all the time, the tires start to dry rot. There's so many different things that we can talk about each one in different videos. And if there's something that you watching this would like to go over in terms of maintenance or things that go bad over time, drop me a comment. I'll be happy to address it. I've gone through so many different issues over the years of not knowing that it needs to be maintained and finding out later, and then it cost me a bunch of money to fix it. So if the sting of the rental cost is not pleasant, but there's tons of people out there now, especially now, that have great rigs that are ready to lend them to you for your amazing cross-country vacation. And at the end of it, you just hand them back the keys and walk away. And I think that's the great thing about the newer peer-to-peer rental services that are really similar to Airbnb, just for RVs. Companies like Outdoorsy or RV and Go, and there's a couple of more out there, but the two that I mentioned are probably the best ones so far. The rest of them have some other customer service issues that I've run into in the past. So if you have any other ideas that you want to see, drop me a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.